Hey, Scott Jordan here for Jancast.com, number 122 for May 5th, 2022. And I'm Mark Warner, and we have a special guest with us today, John Hill. Thank you very much for joining us. Mark, why don't you do the honors here?
Well, I was so pleased that John agreed to be in our VIP special guest for today. And, I met John, we were joking about it like 50 years ago, running out of a bar. No, we're not telling that story, right? No, John and I met when I was involved with education, training, and certification with the ISSA. And John was looking for elements that might be related to cleaning and training for robotics. And that's how it started. John, I don't know if you remember, the first time we met was in an Applebee's for lunch. You were in town and said, hey, why don't we get together and have a quick chat? And I met you and your partner. But anyway, found out during that time that John was an expert at entrepreneurship, being part of the MBA faculty at VCU School of Business, and had really gotten a partnership going with another gentleman who you'll probably want to talk about, John. But the first venture was into LaserClean systems, which was a service provider doing cleaning, but the cleaning was happening all with robots. And then later you started another business called Cobotiq, which goes into more than just that. It goes into the hardware and the software, which I'm sure you'll want to chat about. But everybody, wanted to give you that little history. I think the most important part to me, John, was that I am responsible for getting you on the Future of Robotic panel at the ISSA show in 2019, along with Brain and some other SoftBank. They were all there. Branton Sarah was there as the host. And I forget, what was my role, John? I think I was an usher.
Yeah, with a mic.
Yeah, with a mic. I was an usher with a mic, but I was responsible for getting you hooked up. So I'm taking credit for that, even though I ended up being an usher. But anyway, with all that said, you've been my go-to robotic consultant for years, John. Nobody knows more about it than you, and at least in my world. And so really want to welcome you to the show. And reality is you're hitting it such a crazy time in the history of mankind.
That's for sure. We got world challenges thrown at us. We're kind of coming out of the pandemic. We're kind of going back in again. Are we wearing a mask? We're not wearing a mask. We got war threats. We cleanliness challenges and workforce, which Mark and I have been talking about. The workforce challenge. What do we say? The one sustainable thing we've got is training, because you can never run out of. As long as Mark can keep talking, we'll never run out of that. But John, I think you're coming at it from a whole different solution method with non-humans. So there you go. Hand it off. So tell us a little bit about how you got into business, John.
Yeah, well, we call those non-humans cobots, and cobot is a term of humans working with robots. So the name of our company is Cobotiq, which the cobots is human working with robots, and the IQ at the end is intelligence. So how do you continually get the process better? So our whole focus is looking at productivity and profitability. Increasing productivity leads to profitability. But also we have you might hear the guys cutting the grass out here. We also focus on our labor force. Our labor force, these are repetitive jobs, and so it really relieves the labor force in terms of allowing them not to be as exhausted to go into other fields. So robotics does a lot more than just just clean floors or vacuum floors. So how I got into business is 20 years ago, there was a startup in Richmond called Service Robots. And Service Robots, so I became CFO of Service Robots, and we changed the name to IntelliBot. So Intellibots started in Richmond, Virginia, in the late 90s. Raised several $1 million, which in the late 90s in Richmond was a lot of money. And designed a robot that could run down rectangular halls pretty well. But way too early in the workforce to really to adopt this. So about 2015, a couple of us got together and said, now is the time to really look at 2025, robots are going to be commonplace. So how do you get into the work process? So that's how we started this company that Mark was talking about, LaserClean Systems. So LaserClean Systems, we got some contracts around schools, and we started using robots, and not just robots, just a little bit more about my history. And then if you guys are interested, we can talk about what Mark said about the bar later, but we really wanted to understand automation and how it applies, not just robotics, but looking at the workforce from an automated perspective. So we used iMops and we used battery powered backpacks, and each one of those increased productivity, which drives to profitability. And so each one has their own use, and robots is part of that equation. So robots really are great at doing certain tasks. They're not great at doing everything. We haven't put arms on them yet. Sometimes we sell robots. So we have four models right now. And sometimes folks think they probably do more than they do. They can do. So we have to set expectations, like they don't open doors. They don't make you coffee, but they do clean floors really well. And they're, given. So our focus is to buy units and set them up, deploy them into a space that is and work with the company to workload them. Again, looking at automation to labor instead of labor to automation. And I can talk about that just in a second. But workload it and then keep it running. If you look at robots right now, in most places, I mean, you can see them in Walmarts and Kroger's and things running all the time. Most of the general statistic is they're in automation mode or autonomous mode 25 to 40% of the time. Most of the time, operators are riding them because they're not trained. So you lose your increase and you lose your ROI or your return on that investment. So what our focus is to our units, you can tell you can't ride on, or at least our two small ones. And so our focus is to keep those units running 100% of the time. So you maximize or optimize your return and your productivity. Because once you change your workloading to put that, we call it a partner, a teammate, a cobot, into the workflow, you have to depend on that robot to come to work every night.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about what we're heading towards, again, to make our work more efficient, helping BSCs and in-house cleaners better workload, help them workload and determine the productivity. Because a little bit about it, and you can stop me when you want, but a little bit about the productivity of a robot is when you map it, it goes down a map and it really can hum, and then you get a lot of coverage. The more obstacles you have, the slower it runs.
Right.
So then that's the productivity measure. So the robots that we have, especially our smaller ones, can run in a lot of spaces. But we were at a school up in the Northeast, and in the winter they have heavier traffic and dirtier carpets. So we have to create settings that have a more suction on the vacuum, which lowers the productivity. Or if you have obstacles in the way, like you're in a library, there are tables all over, you're not going to be at optimal productivity, but we can give you the productivity and work it into your workloading. So it's just like a person. And in fact, if you have people that are doing a library, their productivity is less than if you have just a wide open hallway. So it's not like it's different than human workloading. It's just that it's just a robot. Now, the robot can do that repetitive task consistently every time. So
Yeah.
but
I
I'll
think
stop
that
there and
was
get some questions.
that was one of the things that you had brought up to me very early on, was that in what way is a robot actually better than a human, and that's kind of like the question. Well, a robot can't be better than a human. Well, in some ways, maybe.
Yeah.
A human is much better at getting you a coffee when they arrive, but the robot is much better at being incredibly consistent each and every time, regardless how much sleep they got the night before, or what game was on, or what's happening in their home life. So the consistency factor, I thought, was really really valid, because we all see that level of inconsistency that can happen with humans. And I remember we talked quite a bit about workloading, John, in the early part of our discussions. And the idea was, I remember you had come to me and said, how does workloading actually play out for a fully human team? Because what we're looking to do is replace some of those humans. And we got into conversations about different levels of cleaning tasks. There's restorative tasks, which are very involved and very sophisticated. And there's interim tasks, which are kind of like tune-ups. And then there's the daily routine tasks, which, realistically, that's a perfect place to put a robot. It doesn't have to make decisions. It doesn't have to do all that. Use the employees to do those roles that take decision-making, something along those lines, right?
We could redeploy our workforce to do more project work. So we did project work all during the year. Like, we were able to, company before us didn't clean the vents and the rims. So we were able to do that once a quarter. So we kept the same labor force. We were just able to clean more, to redeploy that labor, and to do special work too. That's really where you get the return on a robot is doing special work that humans have to typically do because it's not routine work. And so as part of, and we don't look at as return on investment as much as it's an operational expense. It's just like hiring another person. Right. I mean, so the expenses, and more companies are deciding to lease robots instead of, purchase them, capital purchase, because it makes more sense. It's just like you got another salary for an employee. And so, especially BSCs who are in a finite contract, usually more of a 3-year contract, they can match fund the robot with their operations.
So with the current technology, because I'm sure it's going to change it quite a bit as things improve, but with the current technology, what type of facilities are good candidates for the type of cleaning we're talking about?
So that's a good question. A lot of facilities are available, but let me tell you, kind of looking at different verticals and different configurations. So long rectangular hallways are always great for robots. They can get close to the edge, and once they do that, they're just wide open. We were just at an entertainment company with a 20,000-foot ballroom. Once it hits the edges, it just flies through the rest of it, right? So you're really productive. So long rectangular hallways, hospitals, so verticals like hospitals, airports, where you have wide open. That's where you're gaining. So most robotics companies will tell you, when you look at their square foot per hour, is a theoretical square foot. That's if you got that baby running wide open, there's nobody around, right? And some of the companies even stretch that a little bit. But most of the time, it's not that. That's why we help companies figure out exactly how much they can cover, and what their productivity is. And once you start to really look at your configurations, it's the amount of turns. So when a robot comes to a turn, it naturally slows down. So if you can, one of the robots we have can do their own path planning, and they'll minimize the turns. They'll minimize those things where you slow down. So then that maximizes your productivity and your coverage. So, I mean, that's in my previous business career, I worked on with financial institutions and manufacturing companies to look at costing, profitability, and productivity. And so that's kind of what we're doing with the robots. They fit in certain niches and certain market segments, and we're pursuing those. Not that they won't fit in others, but you're not going to optimize. You're not going to maximize their speed. But you talked about labor. We're doing lots of demos, and most of them are because of lack of labor. So even though they're not as productive as they could be, they're doing libraries where they're having to go through different configurations. There's no alternative. And we actually, when we go, we'll do a demo or a pilot for 30 days, and it takes about 2 weeks to really get the carpet clean of running constantly. It's just because it hasn't been deep clean for so long. So but like Mark said, it's repetitive once you have the map, and you can run as long as you have battery, and it'll charge again.
Well, John, I was intrigued by your comment about the robots actually have the ability to do some mapping by themselves and optimize the situation, where I remember years gone by, you literally had to have an operator walk the thing around, and it had to try to memorize its path. And then, God forbid, somebody left a pair of sneakers in the floor, the next thing you know, it's getting gobbled up, or you try to move it to another location. Now you're putting an operator behind it to walk it and teach it where to go. So I was very intrigued by your comment about how they have the ability to literally do some of that mapping themselves. And all of that is so very, very different than the Roomba that runs back and forth, vacuums one part of the floor 15 times in the hopes that it's going to get all the floor at least once, which is pretty inefficient.
So one of the things mapping, some will map themselves, and some you have to still walk behind. But what I probably meant more of, so the robot uses its sensors to map the area, so then it identifies the area better. The robots that we have, you can talk to the robots. For instance, if you have a doorway that could be open, you can do what they call virtual wall. You can put a wall there and say, never go into that office, right? Even though the door's open, we're going to help you. And so what's really changed in robotics over the 20 years, and Intellibot was really a smart robot as well, but what's changed is the ability for the operator or the technician, the engineer, to really talk to the robot and give it confidence. And so the way the software really works is on a confidence factor. When it feels confident, it's trucking. When it doesn't feel confident, there's two modes. It feels confident and it's on its map and it's trucking, and then it's in obstacle avoidance mode. Then it doesn't feel as confident, and so the utmost consideration in any of the robotic developers is safety. So when it doesn't feel confident, it'll pull back, assess its environment. And the ones we have assess it very well. Processing power is a lot better than it was in 1999. And so they make decisions faster. But so if we can keep it on its path, it's running optimal and most productive. But to your point about mapping, is that it still takes an operator can still do the map, but it's still, you have to you have to look at the map and make sure that you're giving the robot as much confidence as you can, because that's going to be how you optimize your productivity.
Wow. So what, I know we're doing a lot of work at this end with 3D imaging and things like that. Is that going to be like the next big advance where you hold up your iPad with the LiDAR and it shoots the room? Or are you already doing that?
No, yeah, so that's, we're working towards a CAD drawing. You just enter the CAD drawing and have your map, right? And it's it's not as simple as that, but it saves a lot of labor. Now, you can't. So when you map the robot, you look at your map, you take all the noise. So if somebody's walking by, of course the LiDAR will see them.
Yeah.
So just take that out because it's not a permanent thing. So you do these things and it doesn't take a long time. I mean, we're talking maybe 20, 30 minutes to a normal room, but you give it more confidence and that pays off and every time it runs.
Yeah.
So, but what you're talking about with a 3D LiDAR and so we've experimented around with that. It's not a perfect science yet, but what I would say is that the code that's software now, not 20 years ago, but now is a lot open source. So Google and all these companies are really throwing code out, and these kids are, they spend weekends drinking like Red Bull and just developing code, right? And it's all open, and a lot of it's open source. And it's just, in 5 years, you're going to be able to do what you're talking about. Either take a CAD drawing of the room, create the map, or have a 3D LiDAR and do it.
But the big question in 5 years, will it be able to get me my cup of coffee?
Yeah. so now, and a big, not in the US as much, but in Europe and Asia, food delivery robots are huge. So it definitely, you definitely will.
Wow. Well, I think it's very exciting. I love, we love the technology stuff here at Bullen, and just like Jancast and everything else. It's it started a long time ago, and technology gets better and better, and we're able to do things like these Zoom calls with people like you. So I think it's been great. Mark, any other closing comments before we sign off?
I'd really just want to express my gratitude to John Hill. Appreciate you being on the show, and appreciate your friendship, sir.
Well, John, hopefully you'll have me back, and I can give you an update. We're if I could just say one more thing I haven't talked about is we're starting to use more sensors. Where we can tell where there's heavy traffic patterns and things. So we're trying, the IQ portion of our company is trying to figure out how we can use these floating platforms that travel around the building to be more productive. Mm-hmm. So, sensors, having sensors on them like, mold sensors and things, but also using other types of sensors to look at high traffic patterns, or, there's a lot of robots in development that will, for instance, there's one that we're looking at that would sit in a receptionist's office, and if there was a spill or in a grocery store, you could point to on the map where that was, it would go out, clean that spill up and come back. So those are the things in development now that'll be on the market in a year or two. We're talking about outside robots to clean parking lots and stuff. They're being developed now. Yeah. So this development chain is not in the future. It is happening now. They'll be on the market in 6 months to a year.
Yeah, that spill one would be great from a liability standpoint for a supermarket. You would have documented that you sent a robot out, cleaned it up, as compared to just somebody writing it down that they did it. You'd have a data sheet that would show how much time it's spent. And that'd be great for insurance liability, I would think.
Scott, one of the points that I haven't mentioned that you're just focused on is that for BSCs, we give them a map of the coverage.
Yeah.
So when somebody says you didn't clean the floor and X, you've got the map of the run that you can prove. So you have that backup that
Yeah,
that you never could prove before.
yeah.
So
Wow.
that's another really big advantage of these robots.
No, the other big advantage of the robots, since the Internet of Things has become a really big thing, and the ability to create a database of everything, like how much toilet tissue is in the dispenser and hand soap, and as it relates to documenting areas that have been cleaned too. I would imagine that that's the other major gain out of this, is that there's communication coming back from the robot to somebody that is managing the operation and able to build some data sets to be able to figure out what's been done, what's not done, and how often, and frequency, and everything else.
You know, one of the things that's missing in the industry right now that we're working on is just what you said, Mark, is management reporting. So one of the reasons, you know, I'm sure the guy who bought the robots at say Walmart or Kroger doesn't know that the robots are only running so little time. I mean, if they had a report that looked at all the robots over their whole region, they could then take some management action. And that's one there's localized actionable information, but not management actionable information. That's needed. Yeah.
Well, really good stuff, John. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they reach out to you?
So I'll give you two ways.
Yep.
So J Hill, HILL at Cobotiq, COBOTIQ.com, or my cell phone. Call me personally. I'd love to talk to you. Always love talking to guys about robotics. 804-690-2961.
Okay.
Or
Well,
talk to Mark. Mark knows how to get a hold of me.
hopefully this
Especially
show will
when
go
he's got
viral,
Skype.
and you'll get a 500,000 phone calls now.
Okay, that's great. You know, one of the reasons I started talking at ISSA was for that very reason, is to do customer discovery. And, you know, over the 4 years, maybe this is my 5th year, 4 or 5 years, there's more and more interest in this. Everybody's scared to kind of get into that because it's a change, but there's more interest. Everybody sees that they need to make that change because of labor deficiencies.
Yeah. That's what we've been doing. Yeah, we've been talking about that for the last couple months. So, well, great. Thank you very much for joining us. I think everybody will find it as interesting as we have. So thanks again, and see everybody in a couple weeks with a new show, but thanks for tuning in. See y'all.
Cheers,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Cheers, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.